So, welcome everyone to the session, How to Dance with Uncertainty Using Futures Thinking. I'm Tanja Schindler and I'm a futurist. I'm also the founder and the guardian of Futurespace. Futurespace is a network of futurists and forward thinkers, and we try to collaboratively explore the future and make it more tangible. I always try to explain what I'm doing to people, and recently I came up with a metaphor that I want to share in the session. And I think futures thinking is like you dancing to unknown music. And especially in these times of uncertainty, it can be really useful to see a chance like a crisis, or a crisis actually as a chance, and see the new opportunities open up from it. So what I want to share with you today is how I learned how to dance, why you all need to learn how to dance, and why a dictionary that translates dancing into futures literacy can actually help you to understand why you all have to do all of this. But let's start from the start. So in recent events, we came to a point that actually something really unexpected happened. Maybe not even the event, but certainly the consequences and the situation that we are in today. So a few of us then ran into panic mode and shock and are full of anxiety and went to the supermarket hoarding toilet paper and everything else. And somehow also people start now searching for certainty and prediction, and they're reaching out to the foresight community asking for what could happen next and why didn't we predict it properly and other things. And I just want to share with you one thing, and that is a message from the future, Mrs. Unpredictable. Although futurists and scientists all over the world have been talking about a future pandemic arising, no one ever could have expected how it would unfold, how it would spread, and especially the consequences that we have right now, like a shutdown of all over the world. So there is no way that foresight can be used to predict the future. That is not what it is about. Rather, foresight is to create a futures mindset. And this is a unique way of thinking that enables us to act at any time and in any situation, even in the unpredictable. And I know that probably the last days and even the next days, we will hear more about all these foresight terms and thinking. What is futures literacy, which I would to explain to you, it's applying foresight methods by using futures thinking, and you're like, yeah, no, not sure. And it can be confusing. So here's something I came up with to explain what it is in a different way. And therefore, I want to share you a short story about how I learned how to dance. So those are my two passions. On the top, you see me finishing my Master's of Strategic Foresight degree in Australia and Melbourne 2016, and being very passionate about futures thinking and spreading this out into the world. And down me, that's little me, that's 1997 in Germany. Tanja is 10 years old and just learning how to dance. With my neighbor and dance partner Matthias here. I think he's watching, so big shout out to you for letting me share this picture. So when I started learning dancing when I was 10 years old, I actually did not struggle too much with learning the steps because I had good body coordination, but the issue was I was not able to count to the beat. I listened to the music and I'm like, I don't understand it. I can't hear it. Where the hell, so where should I know where to start? Where is the number one count beat? How is the rhythm? So I had to listen to hundreds and hundreds of songs and learning just to count on the beats until I actually got the rhythm. And now, even over 20 years later, you can throw any music at me and I can count in on the number one of any beat without any effort. It's happened all back in my mind. But then recently I discovered that I wanted to go back to dancing. Here in Berlin, there's a big bachata and salsa community, so I wanted to start to dance again. So I thought, well, I'm a former Latin dancer, so shouldn't be an issue. I've listened to the music, of course, I could find a rhythm, I could find the beat, and I'm like, okay, let's go social dancing. I didn't know the steps actually, but I thought, well, I can improvise that. Until, well, there's one challenge. In social dancing, you have dance partners, and you actually don't know exactly how well you work together until you actually dance together. And they can happen that if the partner is a really good leader, I look fantastic. I have the time of my life. I just swivel around the dance floor because he's leading, I'm improvising, I'm moving, and it looks fantastic. The other option is it's a dance partner who's quite new to it, not able to lead, and very uncertain what to do, and I look terrible. I look clumsy, I almost fell over, and I'm like, oh gosh, how can it be so differently? And I figured that somehow, to not always have this gambling on the dance floor, I need to learn the steps. So I learned the steps, some ground routines, and then going back on the dance floor, I could actually step in when someone was not leading and pushing in the right direction, or at least I kind of knew which figure or routine he wants to dance, and I could step in. So at the end, we had then great fun exploring the dance floor. Right. Now you're thinking, well, what the hell does this have to do with futures in foresight thinking? Let me explain. Imagine that uncertainty is actually like listen to a song you've never heard before. It is unknown music and you have no idea at the beginning what to do with it. You feel really uncomfortable and you're not really sure what to do. Then though, you can apply futures thinking. And it is, like I said before, the rhythm and the beat that you're able to discover, and now you can actually move through a song you've never heard before, quite comfortable, alone. Now I throw a dance partner at you. The dance partner in futures literacy is the future. And as long as the future is certain and matched your expectation, you look fantastic. But if the future acts weird or doesn't know what to do, then comes up with a surprise, you'll be shocked. So that's why you need to learn your steps and routines. And those are the foresight methods that we are offering. It can help breaking down routines step by step so you feel more comfortable in, and you can even take over the lead. And taking over the lead, that is where the futures mindset kick in. It's applying foresight methods with using futures thinking, and there you go, steering your dance partner. The question is just where to. And you need to know where to go, and therefore you need to have preferred futures. It's an image in your head where you know that's my goal I want to reach. And lastly, I would explain the dance floor as a futures map that is worth exploring. Bam, that's it. Easy, right? Okay, let's break this down step by step. Here we go. The world's most urgent and persistent question in the world for me and you is why we all have to learn how to dance. And I've explained you in 7 steps how you can do this and why this explains why the health future thinking is so important, and the whole conference is talking about it. Step number 1. Handling uncertainty can be compared to trying to dance to unknown music. The future is not written yet. There's no way we can predict what happened, but we need to learn how to move in an uncertain field. With uncertainty and the future, it's a little bit that, you know, in school, they told you about history and how to learn and process past events, but they never told you what to do with the future, how to deal with what might come, and what is the brain, the mindsets, and the skills you need to do so. We are in such a VUCA world, and I think you heard the term in another speeches quite a lot, that we need to build the resilience. So whatever music is thrown at you, whatever uncertainty, you be able to deal with it. And the way you deal with it is by applying futures thinking. Because knowing how to count the beat and moving with rhythm, that is the skills of applying futures thinking. So whatever music there appears, you feel comfortable with identifying the patterns, feeling the rhythm, and dance. So you look quite good on your own on the dance floor to any music, so with any uncertainty. So futures thinking provides us over time and training with a resilient mindset able to handle the unknown. You can also think about it like being on a road and there is suddenly an obstacle coming at you. You could now focus only on the obstacle, being anxious, being in fear and shock, and most likely you will hit it and cause an accident. Or there's suddenly something happening, you're focusing on the scale of it, reminding yourself that that can happen, and you look around where actually a safe escape route is, and you steer around it. And you may even find new chances and opportunities on the way. So that is how we use futures thinking. It is feeling uncomfortable in uncertainty. So now, here we go. I throw at you your dance partner, the future. You will have a certain assumption of how your dance partner will look, dance, move, and act, but until you start dancing, you just don't know. And it's the same with the future. So we can have assumptions and line out scenarios all over to think about how the future will look like, but we don't know until it actually happens or we start dancing. So the real value actually is here that it doesn't matter who your dance partner is. And even that by dancing with as many dance partners as possible, that you can actually build resilience. So that means that with the future, you have to see it as a challenge to think differently and to stretch your thinking. And the thing is now, as I said before, it depends how the future is, right? So if the future is quite calm and matches your expectations, you will feel comfortable. But what do you do if the future appears as something that is not as you expected? And here we come to the next move. And that is knowing the steps or knowing dance steps and routines describes the process of using foresight methods. So using foresight methods is like learning the new steps of a dance. It rewires your body movement to your brain, enabling moves that you haven't even thought of you were capable of. And it breaks down complexity into a step-by-step until you understand it more. But here's the catch. If you know all the steps to a dance, but you're offbeat and you can't find a rhythm, you won't be able to look amazing on the dance floor. And that is exactly the same with futures thinking and the foresight method. So you need to have your futures thinking, your acknowledgement of being comfortable in uncertainty, challenging biases and assumptions, and being able to identify the patterns by counting to the beat before you apply the steps. So applying foresight methods, of course, over time will gain you into a stretching and a thinking exercise that will help you to improve your futures thinking and develop it further. But you need to have a certain mindset, or at least the beginning of the mindset before. It can also be seen that what I say with future methods in general, well, let's take scenarios. With scenarios, it doesn't really matter how precise they are. I mean, especially here in Germany, we have methods where we take months and months to make the most accurate scenarios. But I would like to challenge that and be bold by saying all of them will be false and the outcome is not as important. It doesn't really matter because it is the way how to get there. To think about those different pathways, those different dance partners along the way so that you think in multiples. And it's kind of like stretching and training your brain to whatever situations they may come. And in the end, using and applying the methods to break down the complexity and come up with new strategic options and creative ideas or opportunities while applying futures thinking, that is actually what makes you resilient. But here's the next step. Let's say you can feel the music, you count the beat, you apply the steps, you feel comfortable on a dance floor. You still have to deal with the future that is thrown at you, your dance partner. And now it all gets all together. The foresight and futures mindset comes in place when you are able to anticipate when to take over the lead. So we don't need to wait for specific futures to actually come true in our favor, but instead we need to establish particular actions that write the future on our own. And this can also be said that a lot of times we think about how the future can go wrong, thinking about the next bad pandemics, thinking about how the causes of climate change will cause more health issues and flooding and anything else. But rarely, unless often, we actually think about how to overcome the issues. How do the positive futures at the end look like that we want to have? So that's the part in where your mindset needs to start. Once you actually acknowledge that you have and are empowered to steer and to come up with the future on your own, or less the direction, it is very important to know where you to lead. So knowing where to lead and is having a preferred future in mind. To make decisions in the present that empower our vision of desired futures, we need to imagine a positive future worth living. And here, coming back to what I just said before, if we just imagine how bad the future will end, your brain will automatically make decisions today that will lead into those futures that are actually not as good. Because you make decisions by the actions, and the actions are based on your imagination. So in order to actually know where to go, of course we have to think about what are options that are severe and what are the things we need to take care of. But what is actually just stated at the end that we want to reach? How does the world look like once we overcome climate change? How does the world look like, maybe not even after the pandemic, but into a system that we anyways wanted to change? And how can the pandemic maybe be an enabler to reach and to go there? So your actions will follow your imagination, and therefore you need to know on the dance floor, in life, in work, where you want to head. And then at the end, you can say, the dance floor is a futures map that you need to explore and navigate through. So we won't be able to test the ground by looking through a periscope. Instead, you need to get on the floor, you feel the surface, and you start exploring. And a lot of times I know that it is hard to actually know what to do with all the trends and scenarios thrown at us. And I have also been thinking about this recently, and I think that there needs to be created a map, collaborative with futures thinkers all over the world, and think about what are the signs everyone is seeing and how can we bring this into a system? And how can then organizations, people and everyone strive from those ideas and go through? I think we have so many different points at the moment where we do a trend research or we do scenarios, but we don't challenge them with each other or bring them in the whole context together. And that is something that I would describe as those future maps that we could create. It's a new way of combining the existing insights into something that is new. So what I want to say is, let's smash those crystal balls and start exploring. There won't be any future predicted that will help you to feel safe or prepared. Instead, it's about you, about your mindset and the capability to see whatever uncertainty is thrown at you, that you can find the rhythm, the beat, know your steps, know when to take over the lead and steer into the direction that you want. So the last thing that I want to ask you today is, are you ready to dance? And if so, think about that futures thinking and the future is not a journey. It is a journey or a tournament. It is not a single dance. So the journey just started. And if you want to continue the journey with me or the idea with the maps that I just explained, please feel free to join the community. It is community.futures-space.com, where we will start the next weeks. How could a map of a collaborative exchange with diverse thinkers look like that we all can use to use as input on our own way into the future? And that is how I explain to you the future by learning how to dance. And then now we'll start looking at your questions. So, question number 1, what questions should teachers ask themselves or self-reflect, guide them through the futures mindset model from one step to the next one? Yes, that's a good question. So, of course, what you've just seen is that I explained to you the concept of what futures thinking is. I haven't digged into what are the tools, the skills, or the mindset. In general, how I explain being a futurist is that you have, it feels a little bit like a feeling schizophrenia in a good way. So every time I walk around and I get a feeling that is in your stomach and you see something like, that is weird, or it makes you anxious, or it makes you happy, then you start to ask why. And you ask why many, many times. Because futures thinking, the concept of it is as well that you first get to the questions and you ask a question without probably having the right answer, but more to explore where this all is coming from. So I think in school, especially, or teachers, it is important to get the kids or the students back to their creativity and their curiosity. That, you know, the 5-year-old children that are always asked why and they don't stop, that is the mindset that we need. Not to accept that we already know the answers, but to see what are the things that have changed and why am I have these feelings around it. So challenging your own bias and assumptions in a way that, you know, you're growing up in a certain country, with a certain history, in a certain culture, and that will always have you put on glasses or looking for a periscope. And by exchanging with others, and that's why also it is so important that we do foresight with others, that is when we're challenging our worldviews. Hope this helps. Okay, let me see where it opened. Here's the next one. Great metaphor. Have you used actually dancing in foresight work? For example, asking people to move to music while thinking about possible preposterous futures. I haven't done it with dancing, but I certainly have been thinking more about it the last couple of weeks. But what I've done is a lot of visioning and lying around the floor, or even what you'll use to do different systems. You know, you stand in a room. But I'm a high believer that actually by releasing some dance move, that can be helping some people going back to creativity. At the beginning, I think futures thinkers, a lot of people feels like dancing, especially when they're not used to dancing, because it is uncomfortable and it can look you funny or ask funny questions. But that's exactly what we need. And I think a next step for foresight and futures thinking is actually making it more tangible by exactly such things, implementing it with dancing, with designs, with art, to make it more tangible, that we can actually feel it in the present. Okay, next one, great presentation. What's a good way to learn about foresight? Well, there are multiple ways how to do it. There are certain online courses at the moment which are quite useful. There are other things like friends of mine from Catch the Future School, where you do a 3 days workshop. We've done one here in Berlin as well. It can also be with self-study. The only thing that needs to be is find your community. You won't be a good futurist if you learn it by yourself, because the challenging thing is if someone asks you questions you don't expect or thinks about things that you don't think about. And therefore, you need to learn foresight in a community and in exchange with others, and to search for that. You can either do this, join our community, we're building up something like that, look for a class or online thing that has a community with it, or show up at certain events that hopefully will be possible soon. Great. What if your partner don't want to dance the same dance? Stakeholders in your business, also good question. I think it's in general that a dance is always something that you have to do with another person. So you somehow have to have some empathy for them and understand what they want to dance. And you need to find maybe a music where you both are comfortable in with. To do this into your business, I think that we focus sometimes in business and economics at the moment too much on shareholders and on customers maybe even, which the customers isn't as bad, but you're dancing in your organization a lot of times with your employees. So I think we should actually focus more on what is the space and the dance floor we create for our employees in a company, because they show up every day, spending half of their life in your business to create something. So why not focus in your business to make them feel needed in a way, or feel having a purpose in what they're creating. And by doing this and having a purposeful organization, I'm sure you find more people to join your dance than if you would try just to ask them, or if you try to just dance what they want. Just have it in an open space. Could you put specific example of future methods? Yes, I said before, I think here in Germany, a lot of times trend analysis and scenarios have been used. I think they're useful, especially trends for creativity and getting started. But one of my favorite methods is CLA from Sohail, who will also speak or has spoken, or is a night session for here in Germany. It's the causal-layered analysis who really digs deep as why actually we're doing this. And it works with metaphors. I think this is why this dancing metaphor came up in the end as well. And it's first about challenging our assumptions and then finding the way, because you can have the best scenarios and your strategies matching that. If you don't know how your culture or even your language in your organization works and you don't change that, you won't be able to do the actual change to do so. But there are over 80 methods or so around. More and more emerging once it gets into strategy and design and other things. Feel free to reach out if you want to know more later. Was a great analogy, very helpful to explain others. But do you have any concrete or tangible examples to reinforce the value of future thinking in society and companies? Yes, I said before, I think that futures thinking is just one way of doing it. I'm sure there are a lot of entrepreneurs, innovators and others who have naturally having this. I just think that by learning how to think differently of the future, it empowers people because they see that they're actually capable of shaping something they haven't been done or doing before. So let me think about concrete and example reinforcing the value of society. Yeah, as I said, I think especially in larger corporations, probably people don't even know why they're showing up in their businesses. And breaking it down to future thinking, we try to do things in a way that they have purpose and a good long-term impact. And if people feel that your company is doing this and taking care of the whole system, they're way more engaged in doing so. And also your customers will be more happy working with you. I think that's also another thing, that futures thinking is just challenging everything. For example, why does it have to say we are unemployed or we are employed, in a way that if I'm unemployed, I always need to look to employment. Well, maybe if I'm unemployed, I'm just reinventing myself and I'm able to create something new out of that. And it can be something very, very positive. And similar, I think futures thinking in companies tries to change and challenge things. Why does my customers have to be my customers and not my partners? Maybe I can learn something from them as well. In your experience, what would be immediate action to start using futures thinking in organization? I think what we need to learn and what is different is that we shouldn't see futures thinking or corporate foresight as one part, especially in the head of an organization that's trying to reach out. It should be a way of thinking in the organization. That means every employee should understand why thinking about the future and actually focusing on a future that the organization wants to create is so important. And I think in the last recent days, that's also why foresight and sometimes people struggled, because you have those scenarios and the strategies, and it's also strategic, but how does it help the people who are in operative business? But I'm saying every person operating business applying futures thinking will help them not to chase any fires, but to really think ahead and following something that creates value for them. So that's why we need to do that. Okay, then how to convince the government and their leaders to implement collaborative futures thinking approach in their policy making? Good questions. I was meeting Riel Miller, who talked on the first day at the UNESCO last year in Paris, which was also super interesting because in Paris, there was the opposite to now. It was the strike zone, so everyone was on the street. And it was another weird feeling and weird scenario compared to now. But saying this is exactly what the UNESCO with the Future Literacy tries to do and try to convince governments that it is needed. Well, the issue with it is, and you can see by now, that such a pandemic at the moment goes back people to more nationalism in the way that we don't think about how Europe or the world, but thinking how to take care of each country. But saying this is a pandemic is a global issue, and as soon as the border will reopen, the whole world will need to have to deal with it. So it actually makes way more sense to work in a global way of thinking, by of course keeping national and countries and traditions and languages and everything that goes with it. I think the issue here, and that's why a lot of people in the future space actually see the pandemic as a chance and not just as a crisis. I think our politics system and also our economic system in the last 10 to 20 years is not heading in a good direction, or was not heading. And politics is a lot of times about power play and not collaboration. And especially economics, the same. It's about growth to no end. And I just challenge this in saying, does it need to? Does it have to? And here I'm saying we don't need to think about how the world look like after we overcome the pandemic in a way like if it's gone, but in a way, what would a world like we anyways would like to see? What would a world look like where collaboration looks like? And that may be a different way than the EU is acting today, but I still see that there's great advantage in collaboration, and there should be something new evolving from this. And maybe we can see the such pandemic as a really learning of how we want to do things differently, and maybe even change some governmental and economic and financial systems to be more long-term oriented and having like a greater good for society and the environment in our mind. Thank you. Okay, let me see. Oh, there are more and more. Let me see. How do you think this mindset of just thinking can be spread in corporate environment? Yeah, I think I mentioned that a little bit with the corporate environment, not as top-down, but really from bottom up, doing small projects that people get engaged and see how it's benefits for them and even for their personal life and their professional life, and then spread it through like a philosophy and not like a task force, say. When you talk about having a preferred image of the future and making decisions and presence that empower you to get there, is this what future back thinking is? Second, is this essential to get out of the present forward thinking? How do you help your clients to make shifts? So back thinking, that's called backcasting, exactly. So you think about a future in the future, then step into the future and go backwards to see what is actually here. I do this with my clients because What we tend to do is, if we try to imagine a 5 years plan or 5-year vision for a company, we will say, oh, that's not possible. It's not the right economical system. It's not political feasible. It doesn't bring us any profit. So everything within 5 years is like, this too complicated. But if you do 10 or 15 years, your brain is not so resistant, because it can be possible that in 10 years, a lot of things have changed. So that's why you need to jump into this longer distance and to be more free about thinking, and then you're going back. So that's how you actually make the shift. And then you have to have this in mind. As said before, if I believe that the pandemic continues, I probably won't buy a car or more savings things. If I think it's over, I do different decisions. But that also means if I have positive images in my mind, my decisions will be more likely to lead to those futures. It's a tricky thing, and something like this self-fulfilling prophecies, but it's just, if you've read a lot of things about goal imagination and visioning and how our brain is looking for things to complete this, although you're not thinking about it, it's very important to see those shifts. The favorite book about foresight methods, that's something to start with. There are many favorite books. I can post probably something about social media about that. But I also think there's a lot of talks like this, or on Medium, on other things. So I wrote mostly blog articles. I will also share a blog article about this talk later today or tomorrow. And I will have some more links into things you can read on. Finding the beat. Yeah, finding the beat, as I said before. I mean, for example, I'm a futurist, but I'm also self-employed. I'm still paying back my student loans, but here I'm sitting and I'm actually feeling quite comfortable in being this whole uncertainty where I don't know where my business is heading, because all of my projects, of course, are canceled as well. But instead of just focusing and being anxious about this thread in my back of my head, and I'm working at the moment on things like, oh great, what does this show us? That shows us that something in online collaboration does work, and a lot of people didn't believe in the future that it would work. So what can we do out of that? It also means that in future, social contact and social networking interaction will have a different opportunity. So what can I do with this? So finding the beat is like being a bit curious, being a bit afraid. It's all totally okay. It's okay also to have fear. It's also okay to feel sad, because if you don't have those emotions, you can't have the other ones. But just be okay with it, not having the answer. So future thinking or predicting foresight, it is not about knowing all the answer. It is okay with not knowing the answers, but asking more questions and explore, so you actually come to new opportunities. Nowadays, there are concerts and many live social medias where the audience meet each other, connecting the same time. How can art festival can stimulate it? And do you think that we can organize events online the same way in the present ones? As said, I also believe that something magical happens if people are in a room and we share some connections more than online. But as you see now, with all these live events, there is some space in between, and it is possible. And I found it very interesting that, I think it was the G20 assembly of the highest politician, who said, oh wow, video conferencing, it actually does work, and it could save a lot of money. With this whole crisis, I've been saying that probably in the next 5 years, due to climate change and all the events they've done, there will more likely, or could be, more people dying than in this current pandemic. It's just not as tangible and fearful as this one at the moment. The thing is, we've been talking about climate change for years and years, and I haven't seen less planes on the air, or looking for new methods to go around, or seeing that there could be less cars in the city. And now you can see the effects if we would actually do that on nature. So it's super interesting to actually see what those impacts could be if we feel that there are more concerns. So I should think that we should use all of the phenomena that we are seeing right now, the connection online, but also maybe what does it mean afterwards? Will there be more jobs where people hug each other? Or what is the connection that is missing? But also, yes, how can we use and empower people to work from home, to meet online, to do things they thought couldn't do before. And a lot of organizations are now working from home, and they thought 1 or 2 months ago, no, it's not feasible for us. So I think we should see it as a chance and to actually thrive digitalization in a good way, where we can see how to do it. Do you recommend any course to learn futures? What about your studies in Australia? Yes, there's I think also another course. So unfortunately, my studies in Australia, they haven't been continued yet. There might be some coming up. But my professor, Peter Hayward, also just launched something, I think, it's called Future Shift. So you can have a look at this as well. Also listen to the podcast Future Pod. There's one where I'm also interviewed, so very proud on that. And Australia is a really amazing country as well. Also was meeting all those futurists I talked about in person, and just I think for me, stepping out of the comfort zone of living in Germany and studying somewhere else abroad, that's kind of like, it's not just future studies, it's the whole experience that changes you, the way you're thinking. So yeah, great thing to do. The German. The method, yeah, I will list something with the methods later. Many people associate dancing with position and choreography, and there are acceptors used. It's also important to recognize the awkwardness of judgment or understanding can also be something beautiful to see. Yes, as I said before, I started as a dancer with tournaments, so I actually started with learning a routine, and I could dance the whole routine without my partner leading at all, because in the tournament both need to know where to go. But then I got into social dancing, and I needed to learn how to follow, but also how to lead, because I was switching positions, but also sometimes, as I said, if I would like to dance something, my partner was not leading, I was kind of pushing to do so. And that's the thing. And this awkwardness is exactly the feeling when you're thrown into uncertainty. As I said before, an uncertain future with an uncertain song, but you have to deal with it. And you have to arrange with the partner that's giving to you, so with the future that's giving to you, until you feel comfortable. But then also see the power that you're actually able to shift and to gear and to lead into a direction that you want. As you mentioned dance, have you applied experiential futures and the foresight methods in your work? Do you think about it? Yes, I would love to do more experimental futures. There's something I want to do. So whatever someone wants to do a project with me with that, shout out, which is once we connect together, or maybe we can do this online, where we can have actually rooms that you experience futures. So that you go in and you're in year 2030 and you hear the noises and you maybe have a person to talk to from. How amazing would that be? Because I think a lot of people have unlearned their imagination and their creativity to feel how it would be in the future. And rooms like this, virtually or in real, could help us to actually feel how certain futures look like, and it would shift from some companies, leaders, or anywhere in the world, how they perceive the future, into something that they won't prefer once they're in it. They will prefer. Would you repeat the name of the community and link, please? Yes, so it's community.futures in a plural -space.com. You can also find this when you follow us on social media, and I can post it there as well again. It's going to be a very difficult dance floor after pandemia. Yes, but it will be super interesting to explore, and I can't wait to map it in a way like what are the opportunities happen. And I know, and I don't want to like lower this, that there is some dramatic views, and also on businesses they struggle, just not leaving out the health issues or the doctors that are dealing with it. It is crazy, and I feel very, very empathetic for them. I'm just saying that could be a chance to actually create something and to have a new playground that we need to explore, and we have the chance to do it differently because we have to, and sometimes we need that push to actually change. Okay, maybe we can reach that in the next 5 minutes. What's a basic foresight method to implement in a company? as I said before, you need to learn the beat before the steps. So before implementing the method, get your company into the thinking space of why it is needed and what is so special about thinking different about the future. And then you can start. What you naturally do is called then environmental scanning, which is just looking for those signals. A lot of my colleagues do this quite precisely and online and report it. I'm saying I'm very unstructured in that way, but I have a brain like a sponge, so I'm super curious. So I read around social media and science fiction and comics and a lot of things where my ideas come up, and they somehow good for me, stuck in my head. But this is something, just opening up, looking outside of what is your normal field and your normal company. And as I said, I can post a few methods, but yeah, try to get in touch first with a community of futurists to get the thinking. How can arts and communication methods be part of the conversation? What type of approach? I think arts and communication, and I went to conferences when they had dancers perform or have a theater about it. And yes, that is amazing. We can have arts and communication that just changes and triggers something in our brain that logical thinking does not. And therefore we need to have this creativity back in our life so that we can deal with the uncertainty. How to encourage people to improvise. People are right now afraid of making mistakes. Yes, that's another thing. We need to create safe places and safe structures where people feel it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to feel super ridiculous, and it's okay to ask questions that are crazy, instead of being like shouted out or pointed out for it. So we have to create new spaces where we acknowledge that people are not only their jobs, they're also human beings behind it, and how can we appreciate and get curious about them and inviting them to share their thinking and not to stop it. Would you recommend to include future thinking in a curriculum that is problem-based teaching? Yes, please. So another initiative, which is currently runs in Germany, but there's also an English version of it, or they're doing both. So if you haven't heard about Teaching the Future, but then especially look into the German version, I think they're doing some things in English as well, which is called Zukunftsbauer. It's called Building the Futures, Builders of the Future. And they're building exactly curriculums to go into schools and to teach kids how they can shape their own futures, because they won't have any jobs that are existing yet, and they need to reinvent themselves all of the time. So they should better know how to do that, and instead throwing tasks at them where they need to have the answers, they need to come up with their own tasks. And that's a new way of thinking. So futures thinking in schools and education, I think, is the most important thing to do. So reach out to, on LinkedIn, you can also, it's my friend and colleague, Aline Möck. She's doing the Zukunftsbauer. As an individual reconsidering my career and feeling a natural inclination to move away from technical field like engineering and healthcare, it feels like a mountain that feels too big to climb. Would you have tips to use the future thinking to build confidence and how to undertake this journey? Well, I'm an engineer myself, so I did study electrical engineering and business in my undergrad, and it's a fantastic way of thinking because you are structured, you understand technical terms, and you have a brain that others don't have. It's just you have that have, and you need to open up to the other. So as me, luckily, I always had the creative half of being a dancer with me, which I think now combines perfectly in future thinking. So maybe look for a hobby that is creative, like learn to play the guitar, learn to dance, learn to paint. Just something that is out of your normal space of your logical thinking and force you to do something different. And you can do that in your hobby before, and then you combine it. Okay, last one. As society, how can we wake up and start watching the next gray elephant? They're just right here. Two, yes. For me, it's one most important thing that future thinking brings with us is also how to deal with information and how to see an information and look for a different information and counterplay this. It's like a trend, look for the counter trend. And I think we need to learn how to consume information in these days so that we are getting into this awakening. How many times I see my family sharing things they're just thrown through WhatsApp and other things without thinking, who was written it, where does it come from, what's the source, what is the intention behind it, who with it, who has written it, and then find another source who tries the opposite, and then compare both and analyze for yourself. It's like, okay, what makes sense here in my world, and then challenge this to someone else, what makes sense to the other world. But don't believe information that is just thrown at you, or especially share it without knowledge who said it and where it's coming from, and even to challenge. And especially if you agree with it 100%, look especially for why not. Because there's this famous, I think, Mark Twain quote, although I'm not sure if actually Mark Twain said it, but it's about, we shouldn't be afraid about the things we don't know, but the things that we know for sure, because then we are just looking for those information who suits our thinking and our believing, and that is why we don't see the gray elephant in the room. So we have to always challenge the opposite of what we are thinking. And yeah, that's why foresight is so powerful, because it triggers a whole new way of exploring the world. And that's why, yeah, we at Foresight Futures community believe that this kind of thinking is so important, and everyone should have access to it and should learn it. So spread it all over the world that is needed, so that we can reach more people and reach out to any of the communities I've just mentioned. And yeah, get in touch with me. I'm lucky to help and to connect and to answer all other questions that I couldn't answer here on social media. So it's Tanja Schindler, Tanja Future Me, or futures-space.com. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.